Well, with the reporting in progress, I'm going to turn up my volume a little bit. We'll go ahead and with that, start the WFRC Budget Committee meeting for October 16th, 2023. Up first, we have a consent agenda, which consists of approval of minutes for May 11th, 2023, and acceptance of financial statements, check registers for April, May, June, July, and August 2023, and the fiscal year 24 budget expenditure report to date.
I'd also like to read the names of attendees as well for the record.
Okay, please do.
All right, I'll do that real quick. In attendance today, we have Marion Florence, Andrea Pearson, Commissioner Lee Perry, Kevin Wells, Mayor Mike Caldwell, John Hatterley, Commissioner Bob Stevenson, Mayor Jeff Silvestrini, Mayor Don Ramsey, and Andrew Gruber. Thanks, and back to the minutes.
Okay, we have that was an action item. If anybody
I'll make a
wants
motion after Andrew Gruber explains it for 45 minutes to approve those items.
That's going to die for lack of a second. So moved.
and okay, we have a
Okay.
motion from Silvestrini and a second from Bob Stevenson. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you very much. No abstentions from that, so that certainly passes. Up next, we have public comment, and I have one if nobody else from the public wants to comment. Any public comment? Okay, hearing none. I'm just looking at this group of men and women that are at the Capitol, and there is not a tie on the bunch. I am so happy that part of my agendas have been accepted and reviewed. Why would you wear something anybody can kill you with? So happy to see nobody's in ties here, and we can just get to the work. Okay, number 3, we have budget amendments and audit report. We have an action item A. You can recommend the fiscal year 23 WFRC audit report to the WFRC Council for approval. Andrew, are you taking that?
No, except I'm going to make one brief comment and then I'm going to turn it over to Marion, and it's not 45 minutes. It's less than 45 seconds. We have 2 things that we're doing today. One of them is we're considering the audit, which our annual audit, which is a clean, positive audit. And we have with us today, John Hatterley, who is our new auditor, and Marion will say a little bit more there. That's item number 1, or our action item number 1. And our second action item is to do a budget, is to recommend approval to the council of a budget amendment, which is a routine budget amendment as we close out the previous fiscal year. So those are the 2 relatively routine items that we have for you today. And Mr. Chair, with that, I would turn it over to Marion, our CFO.
Thank you. Yes, this is John Hatterley. As you all recall, we put out our audit services out to bid. We'd had an auditor for many years that worked with us, Tim Reese, and he retired. And so after careful consideration, we selected Larson and Company as our new auditors, and John and his team have been working with Kevin and me since the spring, really, to close the books and to review the books in detail. And I'm pleased to introduce him to you, John. You there? There he is.
There it is.
Nope.
Can't hear you.
Try my other headphone. Can you hear this?
There you
Yeah.
go. There you go.
Okay, I'm taking this one out. Well,
And let me know if you
Oh.
want me to share anything, John.
I can share. Let me share my screen. I think I can.
Yep.
Change my screens. Give me a sec. You can keep talking if you want for a minute, Marion.
Well, maybe, Chair, I could just run through our budget amendments quickly, because it really is a short, while John gets set up. Would that work?
Sure, sure.
Okay, excellent. Is that all right, John?
Yep.
That would work. So here is the expenditure. As usual, as you are all aware, we closed the books at the end of June, and we like to budget at WFRC in terms of all available funding for the ongoing projects that we're doing. And so what you can see here is that we ended the year just about 7 million and a bit over under the budget. So we spent just over 7 million under the budget, which then carries forward into this year. And so you can see that this year's budget has been amended by about that much, and it's all in the contractual line, practically all in the contractual line, which is also very usual, representing projects that we're doing mainly in the transportation land use connection program, and also in our station area planning, which is just down here, which is a program that we're working on in coordination with MAG to work on station area plans in our region. So that is really the scope of the changes that are going into this amended budget. Again, very much like normal. If there are any questions, I'm happy to take them. But everything is also explained in our footnotes. Every line that has a change has a footnote next to it, which is then described later on in the packet. So are there any questions?
Marion, could you it's a little hard to see.
Uh-oh.
Could you just zoom in on the top
Absolutely.
table so that to make sure that everybody can see
Yeah.
everything there? Yeah, just so that everybody is aware. If you look over on the right, at the top right corner, yeah, where Marion's cursor is, it's still a little hard to see, but you can see
Yeah,
a
it's still.
significant change in that line item, a $7 million change. The other changes are very, very minor, and it
Yeah.
changes all in a carryover, as Marion was saying, from in the contractual line item from FY23 into FY24 for projects that we had budgeted for in 23. They're multi-year projects in nature, and they then we budget the entirety of them in 23 and then carry them forward into 24. Those of you that have been doing our budget committee for a while
I've seen this over and over.
well, remember, this is the regular process we go through. So even though the numbers are large, it is to be anticipated and it is customary. And then there's a few other very modest updates to some other numbers as well.
With that, Andrew, I'd go ahead and move that we approve the amendment.
Okay, heard from Commissioner Stevenson. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Okay, I didn't see who that was.
Repair.
Second from Silva.
Oh, okay, I got you. I got you.
Harry.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, first and second, thank you very much. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, that passes. Thank you very much. Up next, we have budget amendments and auto report. Action item B, review and recommend the fiscal year 24 WFRC budget amendments to the WFRC Council for approval. Maureen, is that again you, or is that going to Andrew?
I think that's what we just did.
No, the budget amendments is what I just did, and we're gonna turn the time over to John Hatterley to present our audit. Which,
Okay, I'm gonna share my screen. Everybody see that?
Yes.
Okay. All right, so Marion just wanted me to quickly introduce us and our firm. We're Larson and Company. We have offices in Salt Lake, Spanish Fork, and Moab. My team operates out of the Spanish Fork office, and 90 to 95% of what we do is government audits. So that's what we do all year round. Spend a lot of time working with different government entities, lots of counties, lots of cities, lots of organizations like yours. We work a lot with UAC with the League of Cities and Towns. So that's kind of us in a nutshell. I don't know, Marion, we're kind of dorks, huh? All right. So I told Marion I would just quickly go through our opinion. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on the financial data just because most of you haven't had time to really look at the financial statements and read through them. So there probably isn't going to be a lot of questions anyways. And I think that management really keeps you guys up to date on where you are financially. So I think it's kind of beating a dead horse when I also go over financial data. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk to you about our opinions, what we give an opinion on, and then communication that we're required to talk to you about. And then you guys can pass that on to the whole council, or I'm happy to meet with the council as well. All right, so if we go in, this is the audit report. Zoom in, can everybody read that? The first couple of paragraphs, now they rearranged the format of the audit report. So the first two paragraphs are the opinion now. The first paragraph just says that we've audited the financial statements of Wasatch Front Regional Council. The second paragraph is our opinion paragraph, and the language in there is very accountant type language. It's an unmodified or unqualified opinion, which is a clean opinion. And then the basis for our opinion is the standards that we have to follow, both under government auditing standards as well as generally accepted auditing standards in the United States. So we follow both guidances as we perform your audit. Your responsibility for the financial statements, that's contained in the next section. You're responsible for the financial statements. So as we prepared them, Andrew, Marion, and Kevin all reviewed the financial statements in depth, made sure that they agreed with the way the wording was in the notes and the MD&A. In this second paragraph, this is part of our new standards. And this really talks about if while preparing your financial statements or as you're preparing for the audit, if there are conditions or events that arise that would prohibit you from continuing as a going concern, at least for the next 12 months, then you have to do an internal analysis and provide that to us on what's the situation? How are you going to overcome the situation? Is this a situation that you can overcome, or, are you kind of a dying entity? And this really came about with COVID. There were a lot of entities that didn't survive through the COVID time period. So now you as an organization are required to look for things like that would affect you as a going concern in the future. And then as you can see on this last bullet point on the second page, we also as auditors, while we're performing the audit, look for conditions or events that would also prohibit you from continuing as a going concern. Required supplementary information. Most of you guys are involved in other governments. So hopefully you know the format of governmental financial statements, but there are sections that don't fall under our opinion, and that is the management's discussion analysis, which always follows the audit report in governmental financial statements. And then there's a section at the end called required supplementary information. Typically that's your budget schedules and your Utah retirement system schedules. So just remember that both of those are required to be with the financial statements, but they don't fall under our opinion. And then supplementary information, since you guys have a single audit every year, that's considered supplementary information. That's required by somebody outside of GASB or the traditional basic financial statements. And in this case, the schedule of federal awards, that single audit is required by the federal government. All right, so I'm going to skip down. To the next report, and this report just outlines that we performed our audit in accordance with government auditing standards. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it. It just says that we look at your internal controls, A, to find out that you actually have controls in place, and B, that they're functioning. If there are material weaknesses or significant deficiencies that we identify as part of our audit, we include them as part of this letter. But since there aren't any, I'm not going to spend any more time on that. The next letter that we're required to issue is for the state auditor. We do give an opinion on your compliance with specific Utah code requirements that the state auditor feels that need to be kind of addressed. And you can see what those areas are, your budgetary compliance, fund balance, the Utah retirement systems, fraud risk assessment, cash management, public treasurer's bond, and then Opening Public Meetings Act. So our opinion is also an unmodified or an unqualified opinion on your compliance. I always put the caveat in there that it's very specific to these areas. You know, you guys may be out of compliance, you know, with some obscure Utah state code that we're not required to look at. And this is also not a legal opinion. So that's one thing that the state auditors have really stressed that we put in there, is this is not a legal opinion. But this one report now kind of mimics, they've updated it to where they're mimicking the audit report format. So not a lot of additional information in here that we really need to go over. Next report is for your single audit. So this one gets sent directly to the federal government. And this is our opinion on your compliance with each of your major federal programs. And once again, in the second paragraph is the language that says that this is an unmodified or an unqualified opinion. In our accountant type language, we say things like, in all material respects, the type of compliance requirements referred to above that could have a direct and material effect on each of its major federal programs for the year ended June 30th, 2020. Basically, that's an unmodified or an unqualified opinion. It's just easier to say unmodified. And then once again, the basis for the guidance that we follow for our opinions, your responsibility for compliance. Really, it's, you know, if you guys are getting grants, in all of your grant contracts, there's going to be compliance requirements. What is allowable? What is not allowable? When do you have to have the money spent by? What is the period of availability? Are you purchasing capital equipment? If there's capital equipment, are you tracking that? Do you have controls in place? So all of those things based on every grant, those all change. And so when we determine
Hey,
whichever
John,
one,
John,
yeah.
John, can
yeah,
I
yeah.
jump in really quick? That
Yep.
you mentioned in that second paragraph, it was your opinion for June 30th, you said 2020. It's actually
Oh,
2023. I just
2023.
want to make
Yeah,
sure
sorry.
that's part of the public record.
Okay. Thanks for that catch. I get talking and sometimes I don't think about what I'm saying.
I do the same, but when it's publicly recorded, I want to make sure that we just make sure it's for 2023 for this year.
Awesome. Thank you. So back to your responsibility. So you guys just need to know what's in the contracts. We know when we pick the major programs, we have the guidance. So we go look up specifically each one of those grants and what the requirements are. But that's all contained in your grant contracts. You guys are going to know that, you know, in advance of when you're getting the federal money. We also look at your internal control to make sure that you have controls over the compliance, making sure that somebody is monitoring what's going on, somebody's reviewing the expenditures, determining whether or not they're allowable, or you know, whether they're being spent within the period of availability. So not only do we look at your compliance, but we make sure that there's controls in place. So controls, really an easy definition is who is doing what at what time. So those three things really document the controls. And those are things that we look at and document as part of our audit. When we do get questioned by the federal government on any grants, that's typically one of the first things that we have to send them is all the controls that you have in place. So sometimes they're not really so concerned about your compliance. They want more control structure internally that's going to protect you and really kind of show them that you have the controls in place, that they don't have to worry about sending you money. They know that you're going to be in compliance. All right, I am going to skip to another report real quick and just kind of briefly go through communication that we are required to talk to you guys about. All right, so this letter is separate from the financial statements because it is directed to you as a committee as well as the council. This letter really has no place outside of your organization. If there are audit findings, we can send this to the state auditor so that they can see what the findings are, but typically this is just a letter
John,
Hey,
let
John.
us,
Up to you.
let
Yeah.
us interject just for a second, just for everybody knows, we asked
Yep.
John to sort of give a quick overview of these matters because he's a new auditor. And we thought it was valuable that you all are aware that he did a top to bottom look at all of our financials and had no findings. But I know Mayor Silvestrini, you have a specific question that you want to.
Yeah, well, it's not really a question. I think it's more a comment, John. And
Yeah.
first of all, I want to congratulate you because the way that this letter to the governance, those charged with governance was worded, caused me to read your entire audit word for word, basically. And was continually looking for the significant risks that were identified, whether there was any improper revenue recognition, cash disbursements, or other kinds of things. I think you could do that. That's my congratulations. My criticism of the way this is worded, I think you could do a lot better job in this paragraph of saying these are the risks that we're concerned about. But rather than the accountant speak about we didn't find any uncorrected misstatements related to these, it would sure have made my life simpler to say we didn't find any kind of concerns with respect to these items, because I was like wondering what, was there, you caught something and then they didn't make a misstatement about it. What does that mean? This is not very clear.
Okay. Yeah, and it's kind of funny because we actually, as a partner group, talked because we actually didn't have that last statement when we initially. So this kind of came out a couple of years ago, and this is something that Marion called me when I sent her the letter, and she goes, "What in the heck is this?" So now part of our guidance says we have to identify what or not yours, but what our significant risks are as part of our audit procedures. So as I explained to Marion, these really don't have anything to do with your entity specifically. This is us as auditors when we're looking at risks. So all of our audits are done on a risk basis. So if you have capital assets, that gets assigned a risk. So as we're planning our tests, what tests are we going to perform to make sure that the balances reported in the financial statements are accurate and that they're being reported fairly? What tests do we have to perform to give that assurance? Well, since capital assets typically have a low risk, then we can do basic procedures. Cash, on the other hand, is inherently going to have a higher risk. So we have to do additional testing to make sure that your cash is appropriately stated and that there's not, misappropriation, there's not, misreporting of the cash in the financial statements, that if there's any estimates involved, then we have to look at that. And then we have overall risk in our engagements. And these are what the overall risks are. So improper revenue recognition, this is a significant risk that we are required to have. It doesn't matter what type of entity you are. So if you're a public company, a private company, nonprofit, government, after kind of the fall of Enron and Arthur Andersen, this came about that every auditor in every audit has to recognize revenue recognition as a significant risk. Cash disbursements, you're a government entity. People are concerned about how you're spending the money. You get a lot of federal money. They're also concerned about how you spend the money. So that becomes a significant risk. And then management's bias, and you can read them. So we just had that for a long time, but then everybody was questioning why is this going on? And so we kind of added that as more of a clarification, but I'm thankful that you said that, because that gives me feedback, because we were trying to clarify, and if it's making it less clear, I guess
It's not a
if it's
complete answer. You
right.
could do a better job of clarifying it, just saying that we didn't find anything that concerned us with respect to these elevated risks.
Yeah,
Okay.
I wonder, instead of saying, can I ask a question? Instead of saying significant risks identified, could it just be listed as potential significant risks or significant risks? Just wording it different, because identified, to me, the same thing happened to me as happened to Mayor Silvestrini when I read this. I was like, what? I don't think we're doing those things. I'm pretty sure we're on top of that stuff. And so I had to dig quite a bit deeper too. So this really shared the wrong message with me too, that raised some red flags that had me very concerned. So I think wording it different would be helpful. And I do realize it says underneath that, based on audit procedures performed, we did not identify. But at that point, I think the reader's gone. It's already red flags. We identified these risks and it sounds so bad. So anyway, just passing along, the wording is
Yeah.
concerning.
Yeah, well, and the identified, like the identifying risks, so that is required language. So those are the significant risks that we identified. So that is like
But John,
template language. Yeah,
I think that the point here, and I want to say, Maris, I really appreciate this, because if that's the way you read it, then that's the way lots of people might read it and
Sure.
get the
Yep.
wrong impression. So John,
It appears to say that these risks were identified in relation to WFRC. That's what we're
100%.
focused on. So, I mean, I think that can be just worded saying that these are risks that you've identified these risks in this type of an entity, but you didn't find anything here.
yeah,
well, so let me clarify something. So these are risks that were identified as part of your audit. It doesn't mean that you're inherently or that you're doing something that is causing these risks. It's just that as part of your audit, these are the significant risks that we identified that we had to address. And what we are looking for is misstatements in the financial statements being caused by these things.
but
If
it's
that makes
done,
sense.
and it's but again, I think the distinction here is that these are risks that you identified by virtue of the nature of organization that we have. So therefore, when you went into
Yes.
audit work, you paid particular attention to these things. I think when one reads this, just skims through this, it'd be pretty easy to think that you did your work in looking at WFRC, and then you thought you found something and you said, wait a second, we're worried that WFRC did these things, and you had to go check on them. So
Right.
Or that you found the things and you know, the concern I had when I read that, the way it's worded, is I expected to see something in your notes that said this cash was misaccounted or you know, I expected to
Sure.
see things that were problems in your conclusions, and I specifically went and looked for notes on that. So the wording just could be cleaned up. You can convey the concept that you're trying to present, but you can also say that these are not things that you identified as problems with this client.
John, let me ask you a question. This is Bob
Yeah.
Stevenson. So if you turn around and take three other audits you've done, would we find these same type of comments
Yep.
being made in the other ones?
Yep.
And if I'm reading this correctly, underneath the potential management bias, you have on there, based on our audit procedures performed, we did not identify any uncorrected misstatements related to these risks noted. So what you're saying to me is that you guys are basically, as part of your process, are going to put those comments or similar in every audit you do. We would probably find those in the audit again next year. And then
Yep.
you would qualify it by saying we found nothing based upon this organization. Am I correct on that?
Yes, and this is a requirement, and that's what I was talking to Mary, that I'm surprised you guys haven't seen this, because this is a requirement for all government auditors. In fact, all auditors. This is the SAS 134 to 145 guidance that came out over 2 years ago. And so I'm actually surprised, but we have been questioned on this, so that's why I'm glad that you're giving me feedback, because we've tried to find a way that makes it clear enough that, hey, this is not like, we're looking for misstatements, and these are the significant risks as part of our audit. So every area has risk, but then we have significant risks that we have to identify in our audit work papers. And if we get audited, just like we're auditing you. In fact, we're just going through ours right now, where we have a firm from Florida that comes and audits all of our audits. And this is exactly what they're looking for, is, okay, what significant risks in every engagement did you perform? What were your significant risks? And so now auditors in general are required to communicate this to the boards. And they're even trying to push that we put this as part of the audit report, which I don't like, because for this reason, it's confusing.
Right. Can I
But I
add something?
appreciate the feedback, because we've tried to find a way to convey that, hey, these were the significant risks, but we didn't find any, there weren't any issues when we did your audit. There weren't any misstatements. Therefore, but there are always going to be significant risks, if that makes sense.
And this is also not a part of our public financial statements. This is a separate document that comes to you as our audit committee. And so the financial statements, I mean, we're totally transparent, and this is certainly would be available, but this is a separate document addressed to you, so we can explain it to you. And what gets posted to the state auditor's website and to our website for transparency is our financial statements, which was the other document that we looked at first.
Marion, thank you, but would this be sent out to the board to our council, for our council meeting in whatever it is, 10 days, this letter?
I think that would be up to, I think the requirement is that it comes to this body, and then you as this body can decide where it goes from here.
Okay, I would just,
I'll say as chair, I'm comfortable if that language needs to be included. I've appreciated the public comments and you all giving John maybe a little bit of your concerns, but I'm okay with that. And as Bob said at the end of that communication, based on our audit procedures performed, we did not identify any uncorrected misstatements related to these risks noted. I don't know if we get around that. And if that's
Well,
the way the language needs to be, I'm okay with that.
Yeah, I appreciate the feedback, because like I said, we have tried to find a way to make it to where it's kind of easily understood. But let me reword it, and then I'll send this letter back to Marion. Because this, like I said, this isn't
John.
part of, this is not going to get uploaded, and then you guys can say, yeah, we like it. No,
yeah.
you know, it makes sense to us now. I mean, because we are accountants and we say things certain ways, and to us, we understand it, but we get to, average people, we have dorky language. And so,
Yeah.
John, it's kind of like attorneys, and I've got two of them
Exactly.
looking on Andrew, looking at you, Jeff, and you, Andrew. When the attorneys speak to me, I need the cliff notes, so that's
Yep.
okay. I get that. I know how
yeah,
that
so
works.
I absolutely do not have a problem with rewording. I appreciate the feedback.
Thank you.
So,
Okay, with that, if I can jump in, this is an action item. It's the review and recommend of the fiscal year 24 WFRC budget amendments to WFRC Council for approval. Can we get a motion?
Sorry, Mayor, Mr. Chair, this is I think you're just reading the wrong language in the agenda. This is the accepting of the audit report.
Where am I then?
Yes, you're down to the one we already did. So
We did B and then A.
Subject to-
I'll make a
now we did
motion.
A. Okay, now we have B next.
I'll make a motion that we approve the audit report as presented after or with the corrected language that will be sent back to us.
I'll
Thank you,
second.
Bob. Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
Okay, second by Silverstream. First and a second, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, we have none then. Sorry, I
So,
skipped over that.
John, I will say that was the most interesting and lively audit discussion I've had in years.
I know most people go to sleep when I stand up. So, hey, thanks.
Well, Jeff, just so you know, you're not going to be invited again after that.
And I want to just take a minute to thank you guys for helping with the process of getting a new auditor. It's always a big shift for an organization to do that, and we've been really grateful. We had Jeff Scott who helped us also, and he's not here, so I wanted to just publicly acknowledge that. And it's just been a pleasure to work with Larson. This was the discussion that we had today was centered around a letter that came this morning. But in general, the whole process has been so very transparent, really helpful to Kevin and me, and has been really interesting and sort of, I think, a great process for us to go through as an organization. And I was really pleased with the results and working with John.
And Marion, I totally agree with that. It's actually really good to have a new auditor come in and take a fresh look at everything. And I'm just very thrilled that, Mayor, when you said you read that, and Mayor, you said you both read that, and you were like, what? This doesn't make sense. Like, that's a good vote of confidence.
Yeah,
But
I'm glad you read it too.
I'm really glad that you asked the question and you pushed on that. So thank you very much.
Okay, so Mike, can I go home now?
Well, if I read the wrong one, then we have the
You home right now?
number 3B, action, review and recommend the fiscal year 2024 WFRC budget amendments to WFRC council for approval.
We already did that one.
That was
earlier.
the first thing that we did.
All right, then
We're
I'm totally
fixing-
confused. All right, up next, Bob, you have the executive director report, and then I'll shut it all down and send everybody home.
Yeah, I'm gonna take off, guys.
Thank
Thanks,
you,
John.
Thanks,
Appreciate
John.
it.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Hey, Commissioner, I just want you to know that we're in Davis County.
That's perfect. Appreciate that. You're wise.
The only thing I'll say on executive director's report, well, two things. One, first, I want to thank Marion for her good work on the budget amendments and then also on the audit. Marion, thank you very much. Marion is really sharp and very detail oriented, and I have a lot of confidence in the work that she's doing. So, Marion, thank you. And then the other thing I'll note, which has nothing directly to do with WFRC, it's just on the federal budget. We're all living in this crazy federal situation and the uncertainties around a shutdown. You know, is it happening? Is it not going to happen? You know, federal action. I just wanted, this is a way to just remind all of you that the way that we approach WFRC's budget for our administration is that we have a cautious, I would say a conservative approach of we have a time lag in our expenditure of funds that come in from the federal government. Most of our money, like 80% of our money that we spend for our agency is from federal dollars through USDOT. And we receive funds in, but we don't spend that dollar the next day. We actually have a time lag that effectively turns into like roughly 6 months. And we did that years and years ago by design, so that if there ever were to be a cutoff or a temporary pause in the flow of our revenues, that we have something of a cushion built in, so that we don't have a disruption to our operations or to our ability to pay vendors or our staff. So just, I want you to know that we hope that's not going to happen. We don't expect that's going to happen, but we are prepared for it because of the way that we do our budgeting. Okay. Okay.
Andrew, I think that's fantastic leadership. Is that the end of your ED report?
Yeah, yes, unless Marion, Kevin, or Andrea is like, wait a second, you were supposed to say X, and then they'll remind me now.
No, I just want to point out, and I mentioned it when I talked about the audit, that Kevin is really my right-hand person on all things finance. So I wanted to pass along some of those compliments also to Kevin for her work with me, with the auditors. They spent a lot of time with us.
Amen. Thank you, Kevin.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Marion, I
Chair.
appreciate that. Executive Director, appreciate that. Appreciate y'all being on here. And with that, I'm gonna ask if there's any other business.
Motion to adjourn.
I was just gonna say, with that, we're adjourned, so you didn't get a chance to vote on that. Okay, great to see y'all.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody.
All right, see ya.
See you later.